Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Jeremy Smith. Much like very public events at the weekend, I have stubbornly refused to be substituted for an actual podcast specialist, but do not fear, we have plenty of league action to chat about, and without any player power trying to force me out before that, here are the latest headlines. On Friday, Saint-Etienne nudged closer to bitter rivals Lyon as they won 1-0 at Dijon. Nevan Subotic's goal in the second half was enough to move Les Verts just 3 points off the Champions League places. Strasbourg came from behind in the other early game against Lille, with Jonathan Okone's opener cancelled out by Anthony Gonçalves' equaliser as the match finished 1 apiece. Saturday saw Paris Saint-Germain notch up another win as they put 3 past Nîmes. Kylian Mbappé scored twice to become the youngest ever Ligue 1 player to reach 50 goals. Both Amiens and Guingamp pulled out big 1-0 wins in their bids to avoid relegation, with the former creating a 4-point gap now to the trapdoor thanks to Segu Guirassi's winner over Nice, while Luca Do's late finish saw off Angers as the bottom side are now just 2 points off the sides above them. On Sunday, Reims and Montpellier pulled off an unexpected goal fest as Remy Oudin's double helped the away side to a 4-2 win, while Nantes have Nicolas Paulois to thank as they won 1-0 at Bordeaux. Toulouse left it late against 10-man Caen as Maxilin Gradel saved the day in their 1-1 draw, while a Hatem Ben Arfelis Rennes were held 1-1 by Marseille, who saw Jordan Amavi sent off in the last few minutes for a very, very cynical foul. In the final match of the weekend, Monaco's biggest test of their quote-unquote new regime ended in victory as they saw off Lyon 2-0. Goals from Gelson Martins and Ronnie Lopez making it 10 points from their last 12, and they are now 5 points above the relegation places. And that's all for now. But to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this evening with that game in Sunday night between Monaco and Lyon, and what would have previously been a top 4 clash. But at the same time, Jez, starting with the game itself and Monaco's win altogether, it seemed a little. And I remember myself and Adam mentioning on Thursday's show that we see the Lyon that plays up to teams or play down to teams because of where Monaco was. It was difficult to tell, and in the end, we saw a Lyon team that weren't at their best, but also a Monaco team that looked stronger, more confident, and punished them.
Yeah, I think you've got to give credit to Monaco and also really look at Lyon, how poor they were. We said it several times that this Monaco side is clearly not a side that should be 5th from bottom or maybe 6th from bottom, whatever they are now. Even during their struggles, I don't think that they should have been down there. But certainly the team that they're putting out now with a fit again Subasic, with a fit again Ronnie Lopez, clearly this is not a relegation candidate team, and in a way the 2 goals, certainly the goal scorers kind of personified the new Monaco. The first goal was made and scored by 2 of the newcomers, and the second goal was pretty much a solo run from Ronnie Lopez, who they severely missed during his mostly injured first half of the season, and he's proving what we all knew anyway, which is what a classy player he is. But then on the other side of it, you look at Lyon, and again both goals. The Balotelle's cross for Martins for the first goal should never really have got through to him. There was pretty lax defending from Lyon there, and then the second goal as well. Dubois lost the ball. Marcelo didn't really put in any kind of challenge to Lopez, and even Anthony Lopez on the Lyon side possibly would be a bit disappointed at being beaten the way he was with what wasn't exactly a powerful shot. So certainly Monaco obviously have got a lot of sort of pep back, but Yeah, very disappointing performance from Lyon, which, I mean, to be fair, coming after that Barcelona match, which probably would take a bit out of them, and Fekir not being risked and really being wrapped up in cotton wool, I think, until the second leg, and then a couple of injuries during the first half must have disrupted them as well, but they still should have put in a better performance than that.
Yeah, it was really disappointing from a Lyon point of view for the sort of performance that they put in. But irrespective of that, I thought that Monaco at the same time didn't allow them the chance really to push on. They went at them from the start, which I think was the exact right thing to do after that taxing performance against Barcelona, and they went at them. And Gelson Martins again grabbing the goal, a great start for him in his Monaco career. That's 3 league goals now, 4 in all competitions, and several assists to go along with that. He's just been an X factor that they needed in the final third, and it's an excellent goal as well. I love how he takes that sort of snapshot between the legs. It almost surprises Antonio Lopez, but it's right in the corner. It's a great finish from the young Portuguese man, and it's great to see him finding the form that he had at Sporting Lisbon. And like you say, the second one, there's question marks about the defending, but it's the sheer desire from Ronnie Lopez fighting against the hero of the hour from midweek, and another one and potting it past, and maybe a mistake by another hero in Lopez as well. They had all the chances. Radamel Falcao hit the post and had that excellent overhead kick as well in the first couple of minutes as well, where he wasn't too far away. They almost scored from a corner late on as well. There's that moment where they obviously have the penalty as well. Glick's done a little bit of a silly foul, but Subasic has saved in there, but a relatively poor penalty at the same time from Depay, who'd come on at half time. But sort of mentioning things off the field with Monaco first, because we will sort of circle back to Lyon and comments made about them after the game. But a lot of managers in Ligue sort of, in some ways, stuffed their nose up about the Monaco situation in January, which is that they have the money and the affordability to bring in 9 players that, as they point out, while we've mentioned that a lot of players getting fit is more important, the fact that they have brought in those players has significantly changed their results, and it's changed their season. A number of Liga managers have expressed their disappointment at that, and the fact that maybe there shouldn't be a January transfer window, which is understandable in a sense, Jez, and you could understand their frustration, but unfortunately this is the world of football we live in, and it's kind of something that if we tried to restrict, you'd have to restrict on a global scale, and with the power and money and influence that there is in football now, you're fighting a losing battle, surely.
Yeah, I think it's a non-argument. I mean, even if it was something that could just be applied to Ligue 1, I can't see anyone doing it for lots of reasons, as much as anything else, just because of the money involved. I'm going to say it probably because of PSG's influence. They're probably always going to want the option of making changes in January as well. It's never going to happen, but I do very much understand the coach's frustrations. I'd say maybe sort of Lyon to a lesser extent, because they're not a direct rival of Monaco at the bottom of the table, but at the same time, they are affected by the fact that they're now playing a different Monaco to teams that were playing them a few weeks back. Trying to think when, like Marseille drew with them earlier in January. Possibly, if that match, Nice as well, if those matches were played now, you could well see Monaco getting 6 points rather than 2 out of them, for example. So I definitely understand the frustration, and in an ideal world, I do think that the January transfer window should be closed or never opened, or as a lot suggested today, maybe just 1 or 2 jokers, as they say in France. Usually they use it as a sort of medical joker where clubs can sort of apply to bring in a lone striker if all their strikers are injured, that kind of thing. Maybe just 1 or 2 players, but Monaco brought in 9 and sent out 9, and that on paper does look ridiculous. And it's more. Someone commented to me today about it and said, well, yeah, but there's risks inherent in that. What if the players don't settle, that kind of thing, which is an absolutely fair point. But the fact is, Monaco have been able, they're completely stuffed up in the summer, and they've got the means and been able to give themselves a second chance. And that's the kind of thing that a Caen or an Amiens, for example, would just go on simply not able to do. And so I think it does skew the competition. But then at the same time, the competition is skewed anyway. It's just a fact. Monaco can spend more money, even if it was just in the summer. Monaco can spend more money than those clubs. PSG can spend more money than Monaco. So that's the nature of football nowadays. And also, to be fair to Monaco, yet again, although there's all these players in the squad, and clearly Balotelli and Martins, for example, are making a difference. They did again start with, I think, only Balotelli, Fabregas, and Balotelli, Fabregas, Silva, and Martins. So it's only 4 of 11 who are January newcomers. I think just as important with Monaco are the players who come back from injury. So it's not right to put it all on their January transfer window activity, but it is something that sits a little uneasily, I think.
Looking back at it, the January transfer window as well, it's fair enough. A lot of these managers didn't really get the backing that Monaco are favourable of, but I'm pretty sure if you handed them 10, 15, 20 million euros and the influence to do it, would they have bought 9 players? I think it's sometimes a little bit hypocrite.
Yeah, I think they've all acknowledged that. Even Genesio, and to be fair to him, he made these comments before the match, not after the defeat. But he said the same thing. It's not right, but no manager is going to do differently. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I always think of this when people go, they should get rid of the winter transfer window, is that it gives teams that are slightly lower down as well a chance to, yes, sometimes when you're doing quite well, it's a chance to lose a player that might be really valuable to you, but obviously it's your option to choose to buy or sell, but also gives you the option to pick up 1 or 2 signings where sometimes that can be just enough that gets you over the line. I think it can be, while I'm not the biggest fan of actually making a move in January, I think you should try and get your business done in the summer. If you are in these high pressure scenarios, it does give you an option to do it. And I think a lot of the smaller teams would actually be at a disadvantage from losing that January transfer window, because if you are stuck in a whole sort of November time and you get to sort of the just before the winter break and you're thinking, well, we look like we're going down here, you've just got to stick with what you've got. And that is I think a lot more dangerous for some of the smaller teams, in fact, than some of the bigger clubs. And but I think we should be thankful this transfer windows at all. I know people have moaned about it in the past, but I remember, I'm pretty sure a lot of us will remember actually when there wasn't January transfer windows and teams used to go on a month or 2 dip and just go and buy a couple of players and then change a whole team. So a team would look different, not just from 6 months on, but from every couple of months they would have a new player coming through the door. So it does make a massive difference that you're not winning through the entire league season of losing your best players or desperately getting dipped in. But
I think that's why a lot of the managers that were sounded out about it kind of said, we're not saying there shouldn't be one, but maybe just limit it to a certain number of players. For me, what I think would be more interesting is that I think that the window should apply to managers as well.
Yeah, that I definitely agree with. Yeah, I think that would make it a lot more interesting, at least anyway, because that's the way they try and do the boost now, isn't it? Instead of trying to grab that 1 or 2 players that maybe in a March time or a November to get you over the line, instead teams go, oh, we'll get rid of our manager, we'll have a bit of a boost for a couple of weeks or months, and then hopefully he can be the one leading us forward. But yeah, maybe some revisions are needed in that, but that's for the lawmakers to make, and that's their job at least anyway. But back on to Lyon, who were disappointing, and after that result against Barcelona, it will really feel a little bit like a gut punch that they did the classic Lyon thing of playing down in an extent to opponents, at least in terms of league position. But comments from Olas after the game, really the ones that caught the eye. Jez, he didn't name anyone specifically, but he was sort of calling out players that were looking for a move in the summer and that had taken their eye off the ball, so to speak. say whatever you will. It could be attributed to 3, 4, 5 Lyon players at the moment. But he's right in saying that they can turn up for these big games, but at the moment, these ones where they need to keep results that show you're a top player and bits like that, people are shirking their responsibilities.
Definitely, for some of them, you could at least sort of attribute it to maybe to youth and the fact that generally, when you're a younger player, you show a little bit less consistency, but it happens too often to be just a coincidence, and whether it's down to the players' mentalities themselves or Genesio being unable to motivate them, I don't know what problem is there, but you should be seeing more from these players, and there are some that I'd be more forgiving of than others. Depay, I think he creates a rod for his own back because he's just, so arrogant, picks himself up so much. So many of these quotes say, pretty much saying, "I'm using Lyon as a stepping stone. Come and get me, Real or Barca or whatever." That's fine if you're backing it up week in, week out. And for the most part, the second part of last season, he did that, probably with a big summer transfer window in mind. But the fact is, he hasn't done that this year. And as we were discussing just before we went on air, I knew he hadn't scored the whole of this calendar year, but you said it goes as far back as early November, I think, which really is a concern for him. And it's obviously it's easier said than done for us to sort of sit here and say, why isn't he scoring in top flight matches? But considering the way he bigs himself up, 20 minutes to 2-0 down at Monaco, stepping out of the penalty, that's the kind of shot you should be making. Fekir has missed a penalty in the last couple of seasons, but the really, really big ones that he's had to make, I think he generally has. His form hasn't been superb the last 2 years, but the difference is that in those big matches, he does step up. Depay simply doesn't, or certainly hasn't this year, and that's the real concern. And then the other two players that people are saying that Olas's comments may have been directed at, Dubois, which I think is a little harsh because he had a good game against Barcelona, and then the media sort of went mad saying Dubois is the next France right back, and I don't think it was necessarily him who asked for all of that attention. So, for him to have an off match, it's not like it's his first off match this season. He has had some sort of growing pains at me. So that one I'm a little bit more forgiving of. And then the other one is Ndombele, who certainly has sort of gone hot and cold this year. And there are rumours that he has taken his eye off the ball, with rumours of teams like Man City being interested. And the fact is that this isn't the best way of putting yourself in a shop window because, as you said, you need to be able to show that you can do it week in, week out against the top teams, but also against the smaller teams. We know that we've seen before that you can do it against the big teams, but he needs to do it more consistently. The only thing I'd say there is that I think it is his manner, and it's well known that when he was a kid and now as well, and it's his weakness as well as his strength, I guess, that he's just, by all accounts, a very, very laid-back character who doesn't really sort of feel the pressure in those big matches, and maybe a little bit like Ozil, maybe his sort of laid-back attitude is misinterpreted as a lack of motivation or a lack of keenness to perform. And I just, sometimes it frustrates me a little that he gets the kind of criticism that Aouar never does, because for me, Aouar has been just as disappointing for large parts of this season. And I don't know if he's kind of the golden boy or something, or it's the type of player that he is, but he seems to escape criticism, which I'm not sure is always right, because I think he goes missing at least as much as anyone there.
Yeah, sometimes those sort of quote-unquote pretty players can get away with it a little bit more. But yeah, going back to Depay quickly, I know we sort of spoke about it a little bit before the show started, but it last goal he scored in any kind of football was for the Netherlands against France, which feels a little bit ironic. He had scored the game before for Lyon, so it's since the 10th of November he scored for club football. And in terms of in 2019, at least anyway, he's only got one assist out of about, I think that looks about 10, maybe even 11 games so far this calendar year, which is what it emphasises the difficulty really with him at the moment, because while he was a frustrating player and he'd have games where he would be really off and you'd be really annoyed at him, a lot of the positives of Depay and a lot of his fans would point out that his stats were good and that he was scoring goals. And admittedly, in the first half of the season, he was still scoring goals. I mean, he got about 10 or 11, I think it's about 10 league goals before the turn of the year, and several assists as well. I think looking about 6 or 7 there as well. But since then, it's all gone pretty dry as well. In fact, he got about 5 assists just before the end of the season, including a couple in the Champions League, really. But as soon as it sort of turned into the new year, and since the comments, ironically, that saying sort of "come and get me" yet again, and going on that ego trip that he sometimes goes on, it's sort of weighed a little bit more heavily on his game than maybe it should have done. And they do need to perform better in these games that not necessarily should be winning. It's maybe a bit of a stretch to say it for Monaco particularly, but given that this happens too regularly against teams that are struggling, that Lyon maybe need to put their ideas up in these ones and have the same kind of focus and drive as they do in these really big games where they have been excellent. And on to a team that has been big in the excellent games, it is Rennes, who got a draw against Marseille at the weekend. Maybe a little bit unlucky. They could have had a goal in the last couple of minutes. Had a Jordan Amavi not committed the most professional of fouls, I think is maybe the only way you could really describe that one. Talking about Rennes, it's been a great week for them, really, but would they be a little bit frustrated that they couldn't get over the line and compound what had been such a positive forward step for them? Finally, first time they've been in knockout competition, in knockout rounds of a European competition, they qualify for the next round straight away, that they couldn't follow that up with a big win against a rival and even push themselves into potentially favourites for a Europa League place?
Yeah, I think there's got to be frustration there. I mean, obviously, the Velodrome, when things are a little bit more upbeat, is not an easy place to go. What's the match at the Velodrome?
It's just at Roseanne Park. Don't worry, that's
okay. So actually, even more so, they're at home. They dominated the first half, and Marseille are obviously in a bit of an upturn of form. But you'd expect with playing at home and with the lead that Marseille effectively gave them. I mean, I saw a Marseille fan tweet quite angrily, this is exactly the kind of match. Rennes have even said that they came back tired after the Europa League match. This is the kind of match where we should be sort of, really attacking them from the off. Instead, we've basically given them a really nice first half where they can just pass the ball around, take it easy, and play into their hands, which was frustrating for Marseille fans and exactly what Rennes fans would have wanted. So having had that first half and having built the lead, I think they should be disappointed not to come away with the win. And had they won, they'd be only a point behind Marseille. As it is, it's still, I think, a 4-point gap, which is at this stage of the season still relatively important, especially since, in theory, Rennes may be distracted by a Europa League run. But I suppose you also have to give Marseille credit for getting back into the match. But talked about Depay going a long period without scoring. Saint-Germain is starting to look a little bit sharper again, and got that goal and a massive egg on his forehead for his troubles, but still managed to score. And I think it's a good result for Marseille, and I think if anyone's disappointed, Rennes probably should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised your man stayed on, to be fair, after that huge bump he had on his head. I was almost certain he would be concussed, but he managed to stay on the pitch and don't know if you'd say credit to him really, because I would have definitely come off, I think. But sort of heading as well to the point I wanted to make about the game, at least before we talk about off the field matters for both clubs, really, in a way that I mentioned it in my intro there. But Marvy's red card, I don't know what they'll do in terms of suspension afterwards, but I know Marseille fans might get the guilt up about this, but I really hate those kind of fouls. I would give him a 3-game ban. He's not just stopped an obvious goal scoring opportunity. It's practically a game of winning that game, a goal that would have won that game. With the one-on-one that's happening there, and the difference it makes to the table, really, 2 extra points for Rennes puts them right behind Reims, and it also means Marseille dropped to 6th. And in the long term of things, we are getting to the short end of the season, really, and these kind of results do pile up. So it could be massive at the end of the season. If Marseille finish a point above Rennes, then they have every right to be aggrieved that Marvi did something that essentially stopped them with a real chance of victory. I can't see this kind of thing. I've mentioned it a few times in the English game that cynical foul should be punished a little bit more heavily to try and cut them out of the game a little bit more, but especially incredibly heinous ones like that. I think he should maybe get a 3-game ban, in all honesty. It's one of those things that for a sportsman style of thing, and yes, it's the classic take one for the team, but it's not something I really want to see in football anymore, in all honesty. It takes away from what should be the entertainment side of the game. But off to matters off the field, at least for both teams, in a way, we'll sort of focus on Rennes first, and they've had their fixture moved for this week. Really, the game against Nîmes, it's not really been mentioned quite yet by the league of when they'll play their game against Nîmes now, but it has been postponed for the time being for a movement to help with their games coming up against Arsenal, which will be really exciting for Rennes fans, certainly. What do you think to the move? A lot of people have praised the fact that Ligue are doing a little bit more to help sides that are in Europe, and they have done in the past as well, to be fair, moved games around a little bit to make it a little bit easier for clubs. I know Paris tend to play sort of Friday or Saturday morning game, or the earlier Saturday games, and they try to avoid teams playing on a Sunday unless it was after a Thursday game. What do you think to the move of them allowing that Nîmes game against Rennes to be moved elsewhere?
I've got just quickly on the Amavi thing. I think it's maybe part of me thinks you have to look at it a little bit like like what we were talking about earlier with the transfer window. I don't disagree with you, and I think there's a lot of things in football that should carry more serious bans than they do. I certainly think it's something you might touch on later as well, if you injure a player, and generally this is something France are quite good on compared to England. If you injure a player, you should be out for at least as long as that player is out. You see players who are out for sort of 6-9 months after a really nasty tackle, and then the player who did it is back after a 3-game ban. So I think there's a few things there, and I agree that professional fouls are very cynical and should carry longer bans, but as long as that's the rule, that's the rule. And I'd say, is that any worse than, apart from the match situation, is that any worse than Ligue conceding the penalty, which was also pretty much a goal scoring chance, so he doesn't even get sent off because it's in the penalty area now, so they still have a goal scoring chance afterwards. And the only other thing I would say to that is that one frustration with Rennes is, I think at the moment they're possibly the divingest team in Ligue 1. It's pretty atrocious, and even with that one, you look at it from the head-on angle, and I'm not even sure that there was much to it. I think he could have stayed on his feet if he'd wanted to, and that would have made it a little bit more interesting. So I'm not going to cry too many tears for Rennes, and yeah, it's a frustrating rule, but sadly, it's one of many rules that I'd change given the chance. On the change of the fixtures, I'm torn on this one as well, and I think I'm pleased to see the league doing something to sort of help French clubs, and so to the extent that it might help Rennes in Europe, then I'm sort of for it. but it's also something that sits a bit uncomfortably with me because if something's wrong, then fine, change it, and you can't go back and change the mistakes that you made in the past. But it does, Marseille, the teams that have just played, looking at this, might have said, well, if we'd been given a couple of breaks last year during our run to the final, we might have got those extra couple of points that would have got us a Champions League place. So, why did Rennes benefit from something that we haven't? And also, it's always been the case. Generally, you play on a Thursday, you play on a Sunday, and that should give you enough. I sort of think I'm not convinced that they need that extra time. And if maybe Ligue had said we are doing this absolutely because we want, we need France to raise its coefficient, then maybe I'd have less problem with it. But the fact that it seems to have come from Rennes saying, "Can we have longer because we're tired?" I think it seems a bit pathetic, and it's still a bit kowtowing to them. I'm not really sure why they've been allowed. And as someone put on Twitter today, if they get as far as the final, does that mean that they'll be playing their rearranged matches till like mid-July? I think again, it's we over the matches that were postponed because of the Gilets jaunes protests. We were saying that it's not right that some teams have been able to play their matches and are getting nice little breaks in between, and others are having to sort of at some point fit in these extra matches. I was saying it's not right that PSG have been given an extra match off, but it's Montpellier now, their competition for sort of the teams with the teams around them for the Europa League spots, it's all skewed. And I think the league should be going out of their way to try to get everyone to play the same matches at the same time, the same weekend as much as possible. And here again, without looking at Rennes' forthcoming matches, if they're going to set a precedent like that, it's also not fair on Rennes' opponents, and it's not fair on the teams around both Rennes and their opponents, for example here. So I like the principle behind it if the principle is to give French clubs a better chance in Europe. But I'm just not convinced that is why it's being done here, and to that extent, I disagree with
it. It's a sometimes the thing we forget about this sometimes we're like, oh, we should do everything we do to help teams be fit and progress in Europe. Then we also forget that is it questioning the integrity of the leagues they stand for. And I suppose sometimes if people think the Premier League, for example, are behind when they don't move teams around for Europe, but maybe there's an argument for and against that makes sense for both ways, really. But other comments that happened in the week, really, it was the big story really for Rennes was Hatem Ben Arfa didn't play in this game, didn't travel with the team, missed a team meeting a couple of days before, saying that with the manager saying that he was exhausted. It's not the first time that Ben Arfa has done something untoward, shall we say. It's not the most egregious thing of missing a team meeting, but he's missed the game, and he's reportedly told Stefan that he's apologised for it and had meant nothing by it. But another day, another moment where we maybe thought that Ben Arfa was turning over a new leaf, and it turns out maybe not quite.
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen how serious it is, whether there is anything to it, and or whether it's sort of the start of something else. But I think Steph, I don't know, because I don't know if it is as simple as that, or Red are sort of trying to hide that there's something more. But Stefan was sort of gave a good answer and then was pressed on it, and the more he was pressed on it, the more rattled he got, and the more his answer sort of didn't quite stand up to scrutiny, and he even if it was just that he was tired, which again I think is pretty pathetic. Why should he be more tired than any of the other players around him? Stefan did eventually admit that he was only that Ben Arfa contacted him only sort of after he should have turned up, rather than before, to say I won't be turning up. So clearly he did a little bit wrong there, and Stefan said it will be dealt with internally. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see if it's the beginning of the latest slippery slope or not. And this is another test of, I guess, of Stefan's quite young career as a coach, how he handles this situation. Probably if it had been 9 out of 10 other players, no one would have batted an eyelid. But just because it's Ben Arthur, people are paying more attention, partly because they're thinking, is this going to be the latest in sort of controversies in his career, or even if it isn't, is he the type of player who always gets a bit more puzzled how the rest of the team can react to that? So I think watch this space, but it could turn out to be something of nothing.
Yeah, it feels like at the moment it's too quick to judge either way, isn't it? I think that, like you say, because it's Ben Arthur, you instantly sort of hark back to the fact that he's done this kind of thing before. But at the same time, people sleep in. I've done it before. I know that it's not necessarily professional for a footballer of his caliber, and you should maybe expect a bit more, but it's not the most obscure thing to say that if he was a little bit tired, he had maybe an extra bit of a lie in, and it's not completely out of the realms of possibility, at least, but we'll sort of see how that situation develop. Back to sort of Marseille to finish before we move on, because news sort of breaking just before we started, really, that Abu Dhabi announced on French television that he is retiring at 32 years old. Admittedly, unfortunately, in a way, a butt of jokes really in the end in England, and I know there will be some praise from corners of Arsenal fans, especially, who saw him, and I know there was a tweet that we put out about Paul Pogba speaking about him last year, and we obviously saw him at Marseille do pretty well in a couple of games until that curse that ended his career, really, in all honesty, is the injuries, and Jesse never really could escape it. Even there was the really bad injury to start off with, obviously, in his Arsenal career, but there was mentions of injuries before he left Auxerre, but for Arsenal themselves, they were saying that maybe he needs to stay another year because he just keep picking up little niggling injuries. He got the big one at Arsenal on his ankle. He had the ACL. He had the ankle sort of flared up a number of times, a couple of hamstring injuries, and he barely played. He's not played since back at Marseille in sort of 2016 now, I believe, sort of the end of that year. It's always going to be classed as one of those careers that, unfortunately, will be forever saying what if.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Pogba gave a quote about him, because he really was the sort of, in a way, the precursor to Pogba. He was, I think, because of his height and the fact that he was at Arsenal when he sort of came onto the scene there. I think people were comparing him to Vieira, but I think he was a lot more than that. He was a real box-to-box player who could do a bit of everything. He could play the Vieira role, but he could play the Pogba role. He could play further forward. I was chatting to someone on Twitter today who referred back to a French match, which I don't remember, against Bosnia, where he played as a number 10 and was excellent. And he had the talent to become one of the best midfielders in the world, and just very cool that he was robbed of the chance to do that. So that in an 11-year career, he played only 208 matches, which nowadays, when people play up to sort of 50, 60 matches a season, really is a shocking statistic. And yes, he's had I think something like 18 different injuries to 18 different parts of his body, and so who's to say whether his career would have been affected anyway? But it really does feel, and certainly Wenger in numerous quotes in the past has feels that it all came down to that horrific tackle against Sunderland, where he broke his ankle and tore ligaments. And when the news came out, I actually found an interview with Dan Smith, who was the 19-year-old who did it to him. And he, in the interview, to be fair, he shows very, very little remorse and seems to paint himself as the victim, that his career has been ruined because of it. And we talked earlier about how one of the rules that I would like to change is if you inflict a long-term injury on a player, then you should sort of suffer the same length of time out of the game. As it turned out, I think he only had a 3-game professional career, and it does feel a little bit like some kind of cosmic payback, karmic payback for what he did to Diaby. But at the same time, he has a bit of a point to say that you can't put everything down to that. And it's just, a little bit like Fofana at Lyon. It even looked like Grenier was going to go that way for a while as well. Just really unfortunate that such a talented player genuinely could have been a fixture in that France midfield for those 11 years, basically. Really was robbed of a sort of consistently high-class career.
Yeah, it's a real shame for him. The one thing I want to do is that I really hope that he looks back on his career and doesn't think, what if, like some fans will do, or some fans will see him as a sort of a butt of a joke of a player that essentially just couldn't get back on the field, and every time he did, he was almost made out of glass, it felt like. But at the same time, he should look back that he played for some fantastic clubs in Arsenal and Marseille, around some incredible players that thought very highly of him. His mental attitude, really, I know we had that 2016 interview that was a little bit heartbreaking, really, to read, but at the same time, his mental attitude to stay positive for all this difficulty is really something to behold, and hopefully he does stay around football and use his experiences to help those around him. Though, there's no player that knows the difficulty of having to come back and try again and fight through these injuries. And it's unfortunate at this point, it's sort of got a little bit too much for him, and I don't blame him at 32, not playing a professional, well, a competitive game at least for almost 3 years now. It's got to that point where he's like, he puts it about best himself, I think, where he says, I decided to quit simply because my body wouldn't follow what I wanted to do anymore. Of course, this is hard, and I've given almost all my life to football, and I don't think anyone can deny him that. He absolutely gave everything he could to try and get on the field, and when he did have those moments, 2 particular seasons at Arsenal, where he was really terrific, and hopefully he can pass on his brilliance and his knowledge and his experiences that are quite separate to a lot of players, like you say, because of what the time he's had to spend out and watch games and study games, that maybe he can pass that on to future generations. But regardless of what he decides to do, really, wish him all the best in his retirement, and hopefully he can enjoy the times that he did play on the football field, at least anyway, because he could be a really excellent footballer to watch. On to matters back in Ligue, and especially down the bottom of the table, at least anyway, because we've mentioned in the last couple of weeks that it's a sort of a melee between 4 or 5 teams, and it remains that way, really, after results of the weekend, because Amiens got a big win. Guingamp even got a big victory when we thought that they maybe, well, they definitely needed it more than anything, but when we thought that they may be down and out, they've grabbed victory, and Amiens are starting to get goals now. Caen sort of denied in the last moment as well, even though they obviously had a man sent off as well, and it was all going off, and heading into sort of focusing on the bottom side, at least Guingamp, who we didn't give a hope or a prayer for, but they did show a lot of things the previous week in the defeat to in the draw to Bordeaux, where especially it was the midweek game, wasn't it, where Rui even had that chance and from close quarters to really grab the points, but it wasn't to be. But just what they needed, really. It feels like a tonic. At the end of the game, celebrations were very verbose, shall we say, really. And now, looking forward, they play Nantes at the weekend that aren't completely out of it yet now, with other results starting to go their way as well. And then they've got a couple of weeks there away to Toulouse, who again aren't completely out of it, and neither in particularly good form. Are Guingamp starting to maybe cause a little bit of a stir at the bottom, Jez?
I think they could potentially be. I mean, the bottom 3, I think it's going to change quite quickly, but the bottom 3 are a little bit adrift now. Dijon have a game in hand, but there's a 4-point gap between Caen 18th and Amiens 17th. But without that win, Guingamp would seriously be cut adrift. And I've alluded alluded to it before as a Metz fan, that Metz were absolutely atrocious last year, and yet it still took sort of the 35th or 36th week before they got relegated. It shows that it doesn't take a lot, just a result here and there, just to sort of keep in the fight. So that goal in the last minute really could prove to be crucial, and especially the fact that 18th place is a playoff place, so it sort of gives you a second chance. Effectively, Guingamp are now only sort of 2 points away from a shot at safety, and I think that makes a difference. And even though obviously the form is a sort of very fragile thing, but following this weekend's matches, even though they're bottom, in some ways you could say that you'd rather be in Guingamp's position than Dijon and Caen, in the sense that at least they're coming off the back of 4 points in 2 games, the sort of adrenaline boost of a dramatic win, and as you said, two sort of makeable matches coming up, whereas Dijon it's still strange to me because they've got such an exciting attacking team, but they're still really seen in the doldrums, and even Caen looks so poor, and they've got Coulpis in now, and they were so close to a crucial win, and them being pegged back so late on as well, it's probably gonna hit them a lot hard. So although Guingamp is still bottom, arguably their tails are up a little bit further than their closest rivals.
That's the thing, isn't it? That it just makes it a tad more interesting, and going up to Caen, who must be heartbroken. Really, it felt like maybe it was one of those results that Caen pull up where they nick a victory that they desperately needed because they've been on an awful run of results. Really, is maybe the only way you can really describe it. And against a team like Toulouse that back in December they beat really at home, and away they go ahead and they get themselves in front just before half time, a perfect time to grab a goal. Ismail Diamonde gets himself red carded, and you think, oh, is it all going to fold in again? And it fortunately does, as Gradel scores like the goal in the last couple of minutes that sort of seals the fate and pushes them closer, because as well as that happening, and obviously Dijon lost to Saint-Etienne, that keeps them in the mire, which meant that Caen went above them on goal difference. But Amiens now are starting to pull away. Monaco's win obviously put them 5 points ahead, but Amiens' win gives them a 4-point advantage. They've got a really tough game coming up against Rennes. Like, you can maybe not see anything coming from that one at least, but in the last couple of weeks, have been really positive for them. 2 wins out of 3. That victory over Caen obviously looks big, but a victory over a Nice side that have been pretty poor in the last couple of games since they beat Lyon. But regardless, getting someone different on the score sheet like Guirassy, Jez, and getting the victory that you needed heading into a relatively favourable March, you might say, maybe a favourable couple of months really for Amiens. They've a lot of their big games already out of the way. They need to pick up wins in these games that they can, and getting a surprise one like this, you may say, it just adds to the case that they may just about have enough to stay up again.
Possibly. On paper, I would still say that they have a weaker team than Dijon and Guingamp, but they've got that sort of big lead over them, 6 points over Guingamp, I think, and 4 over Dijon. That makes a big difference at this stage in the season. And if they can keep it tight, which for I think the first half of the season they weren't doing so, but recently they've tightened up a little bit in defence, then you don't need to score that many to get results. And you've spoken before about how important Konate is to them. It was great to see Guirassy scoring at the weekend, and they don't need to sort of share too many goals between them, as long as the defence are doing their job to scrape out those points. So yeah, I'm a little bit torn on it, because certainly for a lot of the season it did feel like this is, I was going to say one season too many. This is only their second season in Ligue, but it felt like maybe it was a step too much for them to survive again. But a combination of the sort of, I guess, refusal to lie down that we've seen from them over the last almost 2 years, and poor form from a couple of other teams who you'd expect to be doing better, has really given them a good chance. And that they could well get out of it. It does feel, although Toulouse and Nantes are sort of creeping the wrong way, it does feel a little bit like any three of those four, the current bottom four, it might fall between them ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing for Amiens. They, like I said, they got a difficult game of the weekend, but then Nîmes, Angers, Bordeaux, Saint-Etienne, a tougher one there, Dijon, Nantes, Strasbourg, Montpellier, Toulouse, Monaco, Guingamp. There's not really a big swinger in those games. You maybe say the Reims game's a real tough one. Saint-Etienne are always a tough ass. Strasbourg, depending on how they're doing in that part, and same with Montpellier, really. And what we're seeing Monaco-wise in the second to last game of the season, but there's so many opportunities for them left in this end of the season, and to be in the position they're in, I think they've got a real bad chance at this, really, especially given that Caen can't seem to buy a win at the moment, and they've got, like we said, that sort of murderer's row in the next 4 games, especially Paris Saint-Germain. They've got Monaco, they've got Marseille. It's not going to be fun at all for them really in the next couple of weeks. Dijon are away to Lille this weekend. They've then got a difficult home game against Reims. It's not looking great for them either. Maybe those 3 sort of maybe get drift depending on how Guingamp get done, but Amiens and Monaco now got great chances to pull away, and that, depending on how results go below them, might even start pulling those teams that we thought safe in Toulouse and Nantes. Maybe just start getting, shall we say, squeaky bum is maybe the best way to put it more than anything.
I think if anything were to happen to Gradel, Toulouse really could be in trouble.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you need to wrap Gradel in bubble wrap. Make sure he only trains. He can only swim. A bit like Ledley King at the end of his career. He can only swim for training for the rest of the week, because we don't want anyone kicking him. And make sure that he's ready for every single Saturday, Sunday that they need him for, because by Jove, do they need him really more than anything. On to our final bit this week, and it's my favourite bit as always. It's our Ligue 1 snapshots, and I'll start with yourself, Jez. What's your Ligue 1 snapshot for this week?
Mine for this week is Nicolas Palois' winner for Nantes, firstly against his former team. Secondly, a fantastic volley, which was more like a top centre forwards finish than a defender. But also, it's been sort of well documented that he was a pretty close friend of Emiliano Sala. He received one of the last messages that Sala sent before taking off. And he flew over for the funeral. I think maybe even one of the pallbearers. So I think he's probably been affected more than most by what's gone on the last month or so. So it was nice to see him sort of having a really cathartic goal and what proved to be the winner in the match at the weekend.
Yeah, against I think I had a bit of a rant on Thursday about Bordeaux, and I don't think it will sort of end. We might have to see how they do in the next couple of weeks and see if I give them another battering, really, to be fair, because do not watch Bordeaux is my current evaluation of them more than anything. My Ligue snapshot goes to the man who gets too many plaudits, really, to be fair. We should probably stop mentioning, really. Kylian Mbappe, the Paris Saint-Germain forward, scored his 50th Ligue 1 goal at the weekend. Fastest player ever to get 50 goals, or youngest at least anyway as well. A great thing for the young man to achieve. He's been, I think, even better this season. He's certainly been Paris Saint-Germain's most important player, given that there has been injuries to Neymar and Cavani. That's made it a little bit easier than usual, but I think he's becoming on leaps and bounds. He's always been a really excellent player, and he's going to close in on to being one of the best players in the world. There's no doubt about that. But that World Cup has just sort of added an extra incentive for him. He's cut out some of the little bits of silliness. He's had a couple of little moments, but it's especially since the turn of the year, I think he's been absolutely sensational. A real driving force, showing that he can play out on the width and through the middle, even the last couple of games as well, expanding his game as it grows. And he's really going to be a special footballer to watch. And I think you should put your bets on for him to be in the top 3 of the Ballon d'Or for 2019 already, because he's going to be up there really. Because if he keeps putting in performances like this, and he maybe even drag Paris Saint-Germain closer to the Champions League if they can get to the semis or even the final, then there's going to be no stopping him really. And it's unsurprising that he gets a mention as he usually tends to do in these things. That's all that we have time for this evening. My thanks to Jez and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show, which will be back on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.